Good evening and welcome to the December 7th, 2023 Zoning Board of Adjustments regular meeting. It is 6 p.m. and I would like to call this meeting to order. If you do have cell phones, please silence your cell phones. And we do have a quorum of 5 members. We would like to move into our regular agenda and consideration and possible action for VARZ 23-11, fence variance for residents in single-family residential. This is a request by Vito Pina, applicant and owner, for approval of a variance as permitted by the Unified Development Code Ordinance Number 2000-T to allow a 6-foot high decorative fence within the front yard in lieu of the 4-foot permitted in the single-family residential district. This has a general location of 3430 Keys Road, Pearland, Texas. Do we have a staff report?
Excuse me, Chair. Do you mind if we do especially with so many people here who may not have been at one of these before, do you mind if we go back and do the introduction, the agenda, and the format of the hearing before we actually start that public hearing?
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm the chairman, and we have our committee members here, and we have I
was going to say, I'll go through the normal format of the hearing,
yes,
if you will. It's been a little while since we've had one of these meetings. That's why we're a little out of sync right now. But we'll follow up as normal. So for each item tonight, we'll have a call to order followed by a staff report, and then the applicant will have their opportunity to present, after which time the public will be able to comment in either support or opposition. At that time, please state your name and address for the record, be brief and to the point within a 3-minute time frame. And then the board and staff will have a discussion. Afterwards, the board will vote to approve as presented, approve with conditions, denial of the request, or table the item for more information. We have a few items on the agenda. First is a fence variance for 3430 Keys Road. Second is a special exception for construction of a single-family dwelling on a property with an existing nonconformity. That's on 2126 Roy Road. Third is for a front setback variance for an accessory structure within the Old Town Mixed Use District at 2209 North Houston. Then we have a special exception and variance also for property in Old Town Mixed Use at 3602 East Plum. And then a variance or a special exception to construct a building expansion on a property with an existing nonconformity at 5331 West Orange Street. And then a special exception and variance also within the Old Town Mixed Use at 2210 North Galveston Avenue. And finally, a special exception to plat and construct a fence on a property with an existing nonconformity at 2217 North Grand Boulevard. So with that, Chair, you've introduced this item. I believe you were looking for a motion to put it on the table, and then we'll get into staff report.
I'd like to go in, just to go into the staff report.
Okay, cool. So with that, let me hand it over to Patrick Bauer to go through the staff report. Patrick, take it away.
Thank you, Martin. Good evening, Chair, members of the board. As mentioned, the request before you is for a variance from the height requirement for a residential fence in the single-family residential 1 district. As mentioned, the general location is 3430 Keys Road, and as mentioned, the zoning is the R1 district, and specifically the request is for a 6-foot high decorative fence within the front yard in lieu of a maximum 4-foot high fence. And to date, staff has received 1 phone call asking for more information about the request. And so as mentioned, the subject property is the R1 district, as well as all the surrounding properties, as you can see, are also within the single-family residential 1 district. Additionally, looking at the future land use designation of the property, the subject property, as well as all the surrounding properties, are the low-density residential designation. Looking kind of at an aerial view of the property as well as some of the surrounding uses, we see that all the surrounding properties are also used for a single-family residential use. And so getting a little bit of a history on the property, it was originally annexed into the city in 1997. Then the property was platted and developed with the existing single-family residence in 2014. And previously, the board had actually seen a request for this property at the July 6th, 2023 meeting. And that request was originally prompted by the building of a fence without permits. And that was a 8-foot tall fence within the front yard that was within the required 15-foot setback. And that fence was actually at 0 feet from the property line. And so at that meeting, there were 2 requests, one for the fence height, which was at 8 feet, and one for the fence location. And both of those got denied by the board. And additionally, at that meeting, there was 1 adjacent property owner that was in support of the request, as well as 2 that were against the request. And some of the adjacent property owners raised concerns over the impact the existing fencing would have on drainage, as well as noting that the fencing served as a dam to the property and no on-site detention had been provided. And so here we actually get a recent look at what the fence looked like or currently looks like as it was built without permits, and now the property owner is coming back to receive approval for a fence. And so this is just an existing look at the fence, and this would be the actual 8-foot tall fence, which was originally denied, and now a new request is coming back to the board. And so breaking apart these 2 sections, the right-hand side of the image is the actual site plan for the property, and the left-hand side is the proposed fencing for the whole property. And so kind of looking first within the side and rear yard of the property, you are allowed to have an 8-foot tall fence. And so that fence on the top, the proposed fencing in the side and the rear yard, is a 7.5-foot fence that meets that requirement. Within the front yard, though, there are 3 requirements that are to be met. First off, the fence is required to be decorative in nature and have openings of 50%. The second requirement is that it be 15 feet setback from the front property line. And that third requirement pertains to the height of the fence, which is currently a maximum height of 4 feet. And so looking at the proposed fencing, maybe a little small on your side, but that fence is 6 feet tall, with 3 feet of it being a masonry portion and then 3 feet being wrought iron to meet that decorative nature. And looking at the site plan, the proposed fencing now is to be set back 15 feet from the front property line. And so the main aspect that's being requested here is that in that green outlined area, they're requesting for a 6-foot fence to be permitted. And so looking at the approval criteria for a variance, staff found that the request met 3 of the 8 criteria for approval of a variance. And it should be noted that staff has made recent amendments to the UDC in the past couple years to add flexibility in the application for decorative residential fences along thoroughfares. This Keys Road is unfortunately, it's a local street, so it doesn't meet that classification. The proposed fence is similar in character to other fences within the city along those higher classified roadways. And also the board has approved other instances of decorative residential fences, but however, each case is unique for its circumstances and thus must be weighed individually. And so while staff is not strongly opposed to a 6-foot high decorative fence within the front yard, we must maintain the code, and therefore we are unable to recommend approval of the requested variance. However, if the board does decide to approve the requested variance for the fence height, then staff recommends the following as a condition for approval. Prior to the issuance of the permit, the plan shall be updated and reviewed by the city's engineering department to ensure that the proposed fencing does not cause a negative impact on the drainage of adjacent properties. And that concludes staff's report.
Thank you. I'd like to move into applicant presentation. Is there a presentation by the applicant? Would you like to state something, sir? If you would, go to the podium and state your name and address. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Vidal Pineda, 3430 Case Road. And here I am again. We were here about, about 3 months ago, 2 months. And first thing I say, I really didn't know why I was here. Now I have an idea why I'm here. After talking to all of my neighbors and everything about the fence, the previous fence, the one that's on right now, I mean, every one of them are telling me and why that fence has to be moved. Why do we want to move it? Why do y'all need a 15 feet of my property?
Are you asking me a question?
Yes, sir.
Well, that's part of the rules and regulations that Pearland has in the UDC. So that's not, or it's just a board, that's part of Pearland's rules.
I mean, y'all taking that away from me, or I mean, how that's gonna work?
Chair,
It
I would,
just-
I would recommend that at this time of the meeting, it is for the applicant to make a presentation.
Exactly,
If
I
they
was
want to dialogue with staff about why the rules and regulations are there, they're absolutely welcome to do that, but that is not
Exactly.
this portion of the meeting.
That's what I was about to state. So this is your time to give your questions or give your statements, and then after that, we can follow up with the rest of the program here, okay?
Well, like I said, I got together with all my neighbors and everything. We talked here, all my neighbors here. They were gonna say something about it anyway. So that's all I'm gonna say.
Okay, thank you, sir. We'd like to move into the portion where we have persons, like to move into the portion where we have persons wishing to speak for and against proposal. If you have a card, if you would, please bring that to Shelby once you speak. And please state your name and address, and then you have a total of 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Monica Teague, and I live at 4113 Wells Drive, next door to Mr. Pineda. My yard, my backyard is the side yard. I'd just like to say that the fence makes the neighborhood look better, number one. I was here at the July meeting when it was brought up about the 15 feet and why it needed to be moved as far as for city services in the future to be installed, water, sewer, et cetera. That land, as you stated, was annexed in 1997, and nothing has been done out there to add anything. So I kind of feel like that's just kind of a moot point. Secondly, I know it was brought up that it was a safety hazard for people to back out because of the height of the fence. If you notice that it's a circle driveway, and Mr. Pineda and his family, they always use the circle driveway. They're not backing out. They pull out forward, out onto the street. So I don't think that should be an issue either. Being in the city of Pearland myself my entire life, it's a dead-end street, so there's not a lot of traffic along there. It looks nice. It makes the neighborhood look nice. And I see no reason for that additional 2 feet not to be allowed and approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Please state your name and address, and if you would, if you have your yellow card at once you finish. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Billy Griffin. I live at 3317 Keys, 2 houses down from Mr. Vidal. This house is $1 million home. It's kept up like $1 million home. It is the prettiest home in our neighborhood. The 4 foot is brick. The other is wrought iron. You can, like Monica said, you can see through it. It is a circular drive. You can, they don't back out, they pull out. And y'all are wanting to take 15 foot of this property, is that correct?
Go ahead and state what you need to state, sir.
Or y'all wanting to take 15 foot of the property? Y'all want him to move it back 15 foot? Are y'all gonna buy this property? Because I live right down the street and I ain't giving my property up.
Anything else, sir?
You can't answer that?
This is your time to talk, so we're just trying to make sure that you get your voice and
Well,
everything said. So
Like I say, the man keeps this place up.
Yes, sir.
Nicest place in the neighborhood. The wrought iron, you can see through it. There's no reason to move this fence back 15 foot. All of our people here, raise your hands if you're or let the man keep what he's got. This is all on our street, and it's a dead end street. This is every neighbor that's on our street, and we're all for him leaving the fence where it is.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, buddy.
Any other person wishing to speak for or against proposal? Okay. We would like to move into staff and applicant, staff, commission, and applicant discussion. Questions for the staff from the committee?
Question for staff, if I could, on this particular slide. Remind me or us what has changed or what is different from the presentation in July?
Yes, the presentation in July had a 8-foot tall fence within the entirety of the front yard. So any portion that's within the section is south of that most dashed line, that'd be the front yard, and all within there was 8 feet tall. That's the one that got, the vote was 2-3, so it didn't get approval. And then in terms of the 15-foot setback, originally that green line would have been 15 feet more to the, this is technically flipped, so it wouldn't be south, but 15 feet down more. So that arrow is pointing to the fact that there is a 15-foot setback that they're showing currently on their proposed plans. And so that was originally 0 feet, so it's right on the property line. Now the proposed plan pushes it back to 15 feet from the property line. So that's not a part of this request because it meets the requirement.
Okay, so is this bottom green line, is that a representation of where the fence is that we're seeing pictures of?
Not the picture, like the street view images is what it's shown today, and that was the 0 foot. This is what, since that did not receive approval from the board, it got the 0-5 vote. Now they're coming back with a 15-foot setback. So this it'd be different than what you see on the property today.
That would require demolition of the front of the fence, I guess, from where it is today.
Yeah.
Move it back.
Yes.
Okay, and that would be the utility or the line, so we'd have utility access if necessary.
If necessary, and it's also just a part of the adopted code. So Chapter 4 of the Unified Development Code, which is currently up on the screen, discusses fences within the front yard, and it clearly states no residential fence shall be closer than 15 feet to a public street. It then follows up to basically provide an exception to that, and that exception is when you have a decorative fence that is not exceeding 4 feet in height within the front yard. That is the issue that we've been having with this this proposal, and in order to meet the current adopted code, that's why the fence is moved back the 15 feet.
So if we said you can have the 6-foot fence, would that change the requirement of the 15-foot setback?
They're two different issues.
Right, that's, okay, thank you, Martin.
So I need some clarity. So in July, has the fence moved at all?
The fence is not moved.
Okay.
And the fence is not moved because we are not able to issue a permit at this time for a compliant fence or a fence that has received a variance.
Did the applicant come with a request with a permit before the fence was built?
I believe it was explained in the staff report that the fence was built prior to permit, and now we're trying to retroactively make it correct.
Because now we see that with the 15-foot for the
Well, there
code.
was no review to say
Right.
the 15 foot is what's necessary.
Gotcha. Okay.
So irrespective of what we do with the height of the fence, the 15-foot setback is unrelated to that, correct? No connection between
The
distance.
current request that's in front of you is compliant with the 15 foot requirement.
All right. Have the discussions with the applicant been, or is this the result of conversations with the applicant subsequent to July?
Yes, following that, that meeting and the results, staff met with the applicant and discussed the options that are there that, the same request can't be brought, so you couldn't bring back another 8-foot fence, because that was already, a request that came before the board and y'all made a determination. But there can be a different requests, such as the height being changed or the distance being changed. So those are the aspects that they can make a different request, but they can't make the same request to the board because y'all already took action on it.
So this line, the bottom green line, does not represent an agreement or an understanding that we have reached as a compromise, or the city has reached as a compromise. In other words, the applicant disagrees with the 15-foot setback as it stands tonight. Or do we have an agreement of any kind with the applicant?
I apologize if I'm misunderstanding, but after hearing what Mr. Pineda was saying and also looking at what was submitted, there still seems to be a discord in the conversation, because what he's requesting is for a lower fence, 6 foot instead of 8 foot. If I understood him today, or the neighbors who have spoken on his behalf, they still want the fence to stay where it is. And that is not part of the request. That was not what was submitted. So the request is to move the 8-foot fence back to where it should be if you had applied for a permit and had it approved prior to the construction.
That's what I thought. Okay.
And then instead of being 8 foot, bring it down to 6 feet.
And move it back. Is that correct? He would,
That's what the application is for.
Gotcha. Okay.
but the applicant still tonight does not want to have the 15-foot setback with an 8-foot fence.
You actually have, while you couldn't dialogue before in the applicant presentation, you had the opportunity to ask that applicant, or ask Mr. Pineda, the applicant, that question now.
I would also remind the board, though, that y'all have previously taken action on an 8-foot fence at the property line. So just as a reminder, that is something that has already been.
Denied.
Right. So as that's not part of the application, while I'm saying you could ask Mr. Pineda, the applicant, that question, that is not part of the relief that's part of the application today.
Well, may I say something? Just to be clear, we cannot override what we voted on last time. The setback of 15 feet is still applies.
Correct. There will not be a vote on the 15-foot setback because that is not part of the application.
Thank you.
Patrick, can you put up the slide that has the applicant possible suggestion resolutions? There you are.
The only thing that we're voting on tonight is to either allow a 6-foot decorative fence in lieu of the 4-foot fence. That's what we're voting on, correct? Right. Any other questions or comments from the board? Would you read the
Yes.
motion?
You mind? I make a motion to approve variance 23-11 as presented.
It's been motioned and second. Any discussion?
Mr. Acosta, I just wanted to verify, did you want the staff condition for the engineering review to be part of that? Or did you want it just as presented?
I understood that was already in the.
Part of the discussion is that what I wanted to discuss was about the engineering proposal because last time that was one of the main things was understanding the flow of the water and that we didn't have a good understanding of the drainage. So I would like to add that to the conditioning of the approval.
Completely understand, and Mr. Acosta, I apologize if we didn't communicate correctly on that. When we say as presented, it really is as the applicant submitted it. The staff condition is not considered part of as presented. So if you wanted to include the engineering report,
I understood that, but I also understood that since there was no permit issued, that would be part of the permit process.
I understand what you're saying, yes, sir.
Okay.
So because it has to come in for the permit, engineering would traditionally have the opportunity to review. So you don't have to add it as a condition because that's already part of a city requirement.
Correct? Is that correct?
I'm verifying for staff for how fence permits work.
So fences normally don't receive engineering review because they're typically a wood fence. With this being a masonry fence, it's still a fence permit. So if a standard fence permit would not receive
So we would need to include.
which is the reason why we had made the suggestion.
In that case, I'd like to revise my statement to include city engineering department review of the fence as presented by the applicant.
Mr. Iocco, I believe you were the original second. You're okay with that further
Yes, sir, I am.
clarification?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
It's been motioned and second. We've had discussions. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. Motion carries 5-0. We'd like to move into our second consideration and possible action. This is for VARZ 23-16 for a special exception to construct a single-family dwelling on a property with existing nonconformities. This is a request by Christopher Schoeffel, excuse me if I pronounced that incorrectly, applicant and owner for approval of a special exception as permitted by the Unified Development Code Ordinance Number 2000-C to allow for development to occur on a property with an existing nonconformity. This has a general location of 2126 Roy Road, Pearland, Texas. Staff?
Once again, Patrick, take it away.
Thank you, Martin. As mentioned, the special exception is to construct a new single-family dwelling on a property with existing nonconformities, and specifically the nonconformity pertains to an accessory building in the southeast corner of the property closest to Roy Road, and the building actually encroaches into the 100-foot front setback for an accessory structure, which is on a lot that is over 1 acre in size. And as well as it is also encroaching into the Brazoria Drainage District number 4 easement. And to date, staff has not received any comments in support or against the request. As looking at the subject property, the zoning is the Suburban Residential 12 zoning district, and predominantly all the properties around it are that same zoning, with some properties to the southwest being the single-family residential 1 zoning. Looking at the future land use designation of the lot, it is low-density residential, as well as all the surrounding properties are that same designation. Kind of getting a look at an aerial view of the property, we see some single-family residential uses to the east, south, and west, with also some undeveloped land to the north and to the west. So a little bit of history on the property. It was originally developed with a single-family residence in 1944, with additional structures being built in 1977 and 2013. It was then annexed into the city in 1997, and most recently it was platted in 2020. And here we get a view of the subject property from Roy Road. The left-hand image is the southern portion of the lot, and that is the accessory structure, which you can see in the left-hand image. And then on the right-hand image, you get a view of more of the northern portion with the existing residence, which is proposed to be demolished in order to build that new single-family residence. And so here we get a look at the proposed site plan for the property. Mostly in the center of the property is the new single-family dwelling with a new detached garage/workshop. And then in the southeast corner of the property along Roy Road, which is on the right-hand side of the image, we get a look at the existing accessory structure on the lot. And so pertaining to the existing nonconformity on the property, accessory structures, when they are on a lot of over 1 acre in size, are required to be 100 feet setback from the front property line. They're also required to be not within any easements, and they are required to be 3 feet from a common property line. The accessory structure does meet the 3-foot common property line, as it's more than 3 feet away from that side property line. However, as you can see, the 100-foot front setback is that red dash line, and the structure is within that, as well as being within a portion of that BDD4 easement, which is the blue dash line. And if you can see, the green portion outlined is the actual portion of the building that is within that easement. And so staff found that the request met criteria 4 for approval of a special exception. And so the existing property is classified as being non-conforming with regards to the required 100-foot front setback and the encroachment of the BDD4 easement regarding the accessory structure. The accessory structure was constructed in 1977 prior to the subject property being annexed into the city in 1997. And additionally, it was prior to the easement being recorded in 2021 with the plat. And then the requested special exception is to allow for the existing accessory structure to remain within the 100-foot front setback and the easement as the property is developed. So as mentioned, the request meets criteria 4 for approval, and therefore staff recommends approval of the special exception request to allow for construction to occur on a property with an existing nonconformity. And that concludes staff's report.
Thank you, sir. We'd like to move into applicant presentation. Is there an applicant? Yes, sir. If you would state your name and address once you get to the podium.
Christopher Shuffler, 2126 Roy Road. So we currently live on the subject property. I grew up on that property. I bought it from my parents. So longtime Pearland resident, lived on it before it was annexed in 1997. Just like that other property, actually. No sewer, no water, nothing of the sort, but we do get to pay city taxes, so thank God for that, right? But the long and short of it is, we've been working with staff on this project for 4 years now. The only reason there's a right-of-way on Roy Road at that spot is actually because we donated it to the city. We owned under Roy Road, and when the city asked us to replat, that was part of the negotiation, was we gave the right-of-way to the city. The only reason there's an easement there for DD4 is because also, again, during the replat process, we were told we would have to grant an easement to DD4. They cut down every tree on the frontage, and they have the right to remove all the dirt. We already got permission from them to have a fence and the existing barn as encroachments on that easement. We do have permission from DD4 for those encroachments, so they're not in violation of DD4's easement. They're there by permission. And then that 100-foot setback, obviously it does violate that, but didn't exist when my dad and his brother built that in 1997 with salvaged lumber from a construction site that my dad was working, and the sweat off their brow. So I'm trying to build a nice house for my family. They're all sitting right over here. You see my beautiful wife, Carrie, and then our 6 little kids making faces at me. And the house we're in it's not, honestly, as many memories as I have in there, it's not worth repairing. It's time to move on and build something new. When I was a kid, I remember looking in the backyard and telling my mom I was going to build a house in the backyard one day. I was never going to leave. And guess what? I'm doing it. Or I'm trying to. It's been a process. We found out 7 weeks ago that we would have to come in front of you in order to ask permission to keep this barn that, again, has a lot of memories and a lot of value to me. I don't think it's harming anybody. I've had neighbors offer to come and speak on our behalf, and obviously staff recommended approval. I told them, please guys, don't waste your Thursday night on us. And so I'll stop wasting your time now and let you move into the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'd like to move into persons wishing to speak for and against proposal. Yes, sir. Have you filled out a yellow card? Okay, once you finish speaking, there's a yellow card out in the lobby. If you would grab that and fill that out and give that to Ms. Shelby right here in the front.
My name is Andres Garza. I live at 2049 Roy Road. I live northeast of Mr. Scheffler, and I fully support what he's trying to do. I think it's an improvement on our neighborhood. There's other new construction going up. I think it'll make the neighborhood look a lot better. I don't have any issues with any of the encroachments or the barn or the building being that close to the road.
Thank you, sir. Make sure you get that. He has a yellow card for you right here. Any other persons wishing to speak for or against proposal? Okay, we'd like to move into staff and commission and applicant discussion. Any comments or questions from the board?
Guess I should ask Patrick, have there been any other prior applications for a variance because of the 100-foot setback or any other reason in the past that you can remember?
For this property,
Yeah.
or just in general?
Yes, yes.
For this property, no. This is the only variance that ended
Ever.
up being needed. If you remember, Shady Crest had an issue with what type of building was that? That was, I think it was just a storage building, but it was just ahead of the 100-foot line.
Okay.
So we have seen one similar. This one is unique because it's a special exception for the 100-foot, or 100-foot is what would affect it. The Shady Crest example was a new structure that wanted to be in front of the 100-foot.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah, I kind of remember that one. Just, we're not going to vote on this question here, but this is just general information question. When we have a citizen who wants to build, in this case, a house that's not it, and there's not a question of whether it violates the 100-foot setback, but does the city wait until the setback issue is resolved before they go ahead and give permission for the home builder to build the homes? Does that have to happen first, or does it matter?
So in order for a building permit to be issued, the permit has to apply by all of the zoning regulations. And this came up during the review that there was the structure that was not meeting the zoning code. So that's where the special exception kicks in.
Our determination on this issue won't affect whether or not the homeowner or the property owner can build a structure like a home on the property.
Y'all's approval tonight is what will allow the permit to move forward and to ultimately get approval, because it removes that barrier.
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, sir.
Make a motion to approve variance 23-16 for special exception for construction of a single-family dwelling.
It's been motioned. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
It's been motioned and second. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. Motion carries 5-0. We'd like to move into number.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yes, sir. We would like to move into number 3 for consideration and possible action for VARZ 23-17, front setback variance for an accessory structure in Old Town Mixed Use District. This is a request by Joanna Epperson, applicant on behalf of Emily Epperson, owner, for approval of a variance as permitted by the Unified Development Code Ordinance Number 2000-T to allow for a deviation from the minimum front setback for an accessory building in the Old Town Mixed Use District. This is at a general location of 2209 North Houston Avenue, Pearland, Texas. Staff?
Thank you, Chair. Once again, Patrick, take it away.
Thank you, Martin. As mentioned, the variance is to locate an accessory structure, specifically in front of the front building setback line, which is established by the principal building within the Old Town District. And so the zone district, as mentioned in the beginning of the meeting, is the Old Town Mixed Use District. And within this district, there is a requirement for accessory structures that are located within the front of the building line, that they be located behind what would be called the front building setback line, which is established by the principal building. And so you can think of it as wherever the principal building starts, create an imaginary line through that, and the accessory structure, so it's such as a detached garage, is not supposed to go in front of that imaginary line or the front building setback line. And so in this case, the applicant is requesting that the proposed detached garage be located 23 feet in front of the principal building setback line. And we'll be able to show this further with the site plan, which is to follow. And so staff has received one phone call, which was in support of the request so far. And so looking at the surrounding properties, they are all the Old Town Mixed Use zoning district, which allows for a mixture of non-residential and residential uses. And the future land use of the property, as well as all the surrounding properties, is the Village District designation, which is supposed to support all the Old Town zoning districts. And looking at an aerial of the property, we see the single-family residential use is surrounding all four sides of the property. And a little bit of history on the property: it was originally developed with a single-family residence in 1940. It was annexed into the city in 1959. And then more recently, in 2023, the property was platted, and the original residence on the site was moved off-site to a new location. And so here we get a look at, this is actually the property today with that, the existing residents moved off, and we actually get a look at some of the unique features of the site, that there's two existing oak trees that play into the applicant's request. And so here's the proposed site plan for the property. On the left-hand side of the site plan is the principal building. That's the, I should say, the longer, skinnier building. And so North Houston Avenue is actually on the bottom of your screen. And so North Houston Avenue would set where the front setback line is to be. And from there, you would say North Houston Avenue is on the bottom. So the front of the building, going from North Houston Avenue to the main building, which will be shown on the next slide, would create that setback line. Additionally, there's the proposed detached garage, as well as a 60-inch existing oak tree and a 48-inch oak tree. And so in this image, we get a look at the front setback variance, and the dashed line represents that principal building setback line. So it's the line that the principal building creates for, by the code, is where accessory structures are not permitted to go in front of that. In this case, however, the detached garage is being requested to be 23 feet in front of that setback line, and additionally, it'll be 15 feet from the front property line. And the applicant has cited that the proposed location of the detached garage is needed in order to avoid the critical root zone of that 60-inch oak tree, which is, I should say, it's just above where Martin's pointing right now. That's the tree that, to place it further closer to it, or closer to that setback line, starts encroaching on that critical root zone and can impact the preservation of that tree. So here we get a look actually where this is roughly where that garage would go. You can see the 60-inch tree is actually the one in the distance, but the 48-inch tree actually kind of makes its way over to that area as well, and kind of impacts where the location of that garage can go, or any garage that would be located along North Houston Avenue. And so staff found that the request met 6 of the 8 criteria for granting a variance. And while the request does not meet all 8 of the criteria for granting a variance, staff is in support of the preservation of existing mature trees on the property. And additionally, it should be recognized that the location of the detached garage is in a position that avoids the critical root zone and provides a 15-foot setback from the front property line. And additionally, it should be noted that within the Old Town Mixed Use District, the front setback line, the minimum front setback line is 0 feet from the property line if you're not encroaching on any easements. So therefore, staff recommends approval of the requested variance for the deviation to the front setback for the accessory structure. And that concludes staff's report.
Thank you. Is there an applicant presentation? Thank you. We'd like to move into person wishing to speak for or against proposal.
Thought there may have been one card that was submitted.
Yes, David Del Tolos? Okay. We'd like to move into staff, commission, and applicant discussion. Any questions from the board to the staff or applicant?
Just a question from staff as a matter of policy. What does the city do in instances where we have for want of a better term, a heritage type tree in a situation like this? Does the city have the right to come in and just plow those under when it wants to, or what happens?
So I'm going to take a stab at the question. But I think the way you're leaning into it may need to answer it a different way. So both the 60-inch tree and the 48-inch tree are on private property. So the city will not touch the portions of the tree that are within the bounds of the private property. We will make sure that anything that encroaches into the right-of-way meets certain height clearances so that way vehicles aren't impacted. But that's already been well taken care of.
Thank you. We'd like to move into consideration and possible action. Would you put the motion on the screen, please?
I make a motion to approve variance 23-17 as presented.
It's been motioned. Is there a second? It's been motioned and second. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. Motion carries 5-0. We'd like to move into number 4, your consideration and possible action for VARZ 23-13, special exception and variance for a non-residential use in the Old Town Mixed Use District. This is a request by Lawrence and Tessie Gurley, applicant and owner, for approval of a special exception and a variance as permitted by the Unified Development Code Ordinance Number 2000-T to allow a special exception for development to occur on a property with existing nonconformities, variance to reduce the landscape buffer for a non-residential use that has a side or rear contagious to any residential use or residential zoning district, variance to reduce the landscape buffer for off-street parking that is provided within the front yard. This has a general location of 3602 East Plum Street, Pearland, Texas. Staff?
Thank you, Chair. So for this item, previously we had ran the description with all 3 requests. As you'll note within the staff report, C was removed, so we'll just be talking about request A and request B. And this property is within our Old Town Mixed Use zoning district. That district is intended and enables the reuse of buildings that are within that district from being residential in nature to being expanded into non-residential uses, commercial, retail, office space, whatever the applicant and end user eventually desires to develop in there. With that, they have to meet certain criteria as the use changes from one designate or from the residential designation to the non-residential designation. So that's where we end up with the special exception for the buffer requirements, and then a landscape buffer variance to allow for the parking to be within 3 feet, or to be 3 feet from the south property line in lieu of the 30-foot landscape buffer. So with that, we'll go into more of a description of the property and the existing use or the existing characteristics on site. So for public comment, we had one written that was provided to the board, and then one phone call, both in opposition. Here you can see the site and surrounding area. Again, this is this side of the street is all within the mixed use, and then the opposite side of the street is all within the R2 single-family residential zoning district. You've got a mixture of the village district, some medium density residential, and then the public, semi-public with the school on the other side. And then a variety of single-family residential building types, either in detached or attached, being north, south, and west, and then Salvatore School across the street. So the subject property was first developed in 1948 with a single-family residence. It was annexed into the city in 1959 in the first ordinance that the city adopted. The property is currently in the process of going through platting, and in order to have commercial permitting for this change of use. So you can see a view of both Galveston and Plum for what they are looking to utilize into a commercial space. Here we've got a view of the property from the back alley. And then let's walk you through the proposed site plan. So what they are intending to do off of North Galveston are to have 3 backout spaces. Then you've got the existing near 2,000 square foot building. And then there are 6 spaces, 4 in normal and 1 in tandem. But they are looking to preserve a 30-inch tree that is on the back alley. So you can see that tree in this image. This is what the applicant has presented for a landscape plan. And you can see for the existing nonconformity, the residential adjacency requirement on landscape buffers would essentially eat half of the property if it were to be applied, as the outlined portion of the building would be within that necessary landscape buffer. So this is why it is viewed as an existing nonconformity, because the building clearly exists within that landscape buffer. As such, staff sees that it meets criteria number 4 for approval of the special exception. And as such, in order for this to be brought into compliance, the existing property with the change of use calls for the 30-foot landscape strip against the south property line. And the special exception allows the existing building to remain within that 30-foot landscape buffer while the property becomes developed. On that, it meets criteria 4 of the UDC, and staff recommends approval of the special exception to allow the improvements to occur with that existing nonconformity. So that is portion A. Now we'll move on to portion B of the request. Go back to the aerial and the proposed improvements. You can see that they are requesting the reduction, which is the variance of that 30-foot landscape buffer, to be brought down to a 3-foot landscape strip. They are, again, proposing to preserve that 30-inch existing tree. And staff finds that this meets 5 out of the 8 criteria for approval. And that while the intersection and existing trees pose challenges to the property, staff finds that the hardship by the applicant is based on the applicant's desire to have more parking on the property than the minimum number of spaces required by the Unified Development Code. However, staff also recognizes that when lots within Old Town are changed from residential use to non-residential use, those lots are presented with a unique challenge, as they may be surrounded by single-family residential uses and thus may be required to provide the 25 or 30-foot landscape buffer that potentially covers a portion of the lot. In the case of the subject property, the landscape buffer covers about half of the lot. As staff is currently working with City Council to rewrite the Unified Development Code, this is one area that we're looking to change and are seeking to amend to provide relief from this requirement and provide some new regulations. Staff recognizes that the current requirement for landscape buffers places a hardship on properties being redeveloped within the Old Town Site District, as the buffers restrict new improvements such as placing parking on the property. Therefore, for the variance, staff recommends approval of the requested variance with the following condition. Within the landscape buffer along the south property line, for the length of the parking area, a vegetative screen dense enough to be completely opaque year-round shall be provided, with which is at least 4 feet tall at planting and at least 8 feet tall within 12 months. So with that, I will pass back to you, Chair.
Thank you, sir. Is there an applicant presentation? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Do we have any person wishing to speak for or against proposal? Yes, sir. If you would go to the podium and state your name and address, and have you filled out a yellow? Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Bruce Honore, 3219 Old Alvin Road. I own the property directly behind it, 2203 2203 to 11. There's 5 townhouses right on the back side of it. I think the buffer needs to stay there. The buffer's 30-foot landscape there on the south property, or it's a masonry. If you don't do the 30-foot, you can still do the masonry wall and what they're asking to do on the 3-foot instead of 20-foot. The house was there for 40 years, 50 years or so. I mean, it's always residential. The reason we're changing it now is to get more parking. But what is that going to do to my tenants that's already there? And more cars coming in there. It's already a nightmare there when school's early in the morning and late in the evening. And now we're going to have more cars coming in, parking in the back. And once they do it, the Chick-fil-A that's coming up next to it, you know, they don't want to do the walls on either side, the landscape walls on either side of their property also. So once you allow her to park back there, then they're going to want to park there eventually, because why wouldn't they if you're going to eliminate all the landscape buffers? And other than that, I mean, I'll say no.
Thank you, sir. Any other person wishing to speak for or against the proposal? Yes, sir.
Good Good evening. I'm Jason Miller. I live at 2207 North Park Avenue. It's already a nightmare trying to get out of that back parking lot because our garages are detached on the back side. I mean, also on the right side, there's this commercial, I think it's this, what kind of place is it? A counseling center? And they already have a lot of traffic coming back on that road. I'm afraid that if she puts 3 more spots back there, first of all, you're gonna open up for when school zone starts, they're already parking on the side.
Hey, look, sound.
Can you hear me? Yep, we have it.
Yep, we got it.
I'd say we've still got 4 more minutes because you said until 7:10. So, but it's at least working.
Boy.
It is 7:15. We would like to reconvene and start where we left off with the person wishing to speak for or against proposal. This is for the request of variance VARZ 23-13. You can continue, sir.
So basically, I'm against the back portion where she wants to put parking at. It's a like I was saying, it's a nightmare during the school hours. I mean, people block up that road as it is. In and out traffic, I feel that that's a gravel road. I mean, between, you know, the conversation of Mr. Honoré with her, who's gonna fix it as far as it falls apart, because all now it's a heavy traffic way because her people for her commercial building will be parking back there. They're gonna have to encroach on that gravel road. I think it's a bad idea all the way around. So I'm against it 100%.
Thank you, sir. Any other person wishing to speak for or against proposal? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Brittany Miller. I live at 2207 North Park Avenue as well. I am against the parking in the back. I am a stay-at-home wife and mom, and I also work from my house too. And every other week we get our daughter, and I have to deal with that school traffic on Plum Street. So dealing with a business back there is going to be even more of a headache. I was just telling Miss Honoré how I have to leave my house 20 minutes in advance just to get my daughter from school. That's going to put more time on me and away from what my day-to-day job is. So I am against that because of how much traffic it will cause and how much congestion it's going to cause during those school hours, especially during school years.
Thank you. If you would pass those yellow sheets to Ms. Shelby.
Okay. Do you need two?
Yes.
Two separate ones? Okay.
Yes. Any other person wishing to speak for or against proposal? We'd like to move into staff, commission, and applicant discussion. Any comments or questions from the board to the staff or to?
What did we decide how we would vote on this as two separate issues?
Yeah, we're gonna break down, A and B have separate votings for each section.
Okay, so.
So the first, would you place A? And, yeah.
So again, just to summarize A, that's for the special exception that is created when they change the use from residential to non-residential. And the house exists within a portion of where that buffer would be required to be. And staff is recommending approval of the special exception.
Martin, just a clarification. Changing in part A, changing the request to move from a residential to a what?
So the buffer is required whenever you have a non-residential use that shares a property line with a residential use. So in this case, this property shares this common boundary, and due to the way that the Old Town zoning district is written, it goes back to the general business district, and that's what kicks in the requirement for a buffer to be installed or to be provided within that area.
But
the special exception is because the home or the previous home exists within that buffer.
And replatting wouldn't have anything to do with that, or would that be a shortcut?
Makes no change to this. You would only be subdividing the property, and at that point you would be creating a property line through a structure, and that creates other zoning issues and also building code issues, because then the walls would need to be fire rated.
Mr. Shrum, if I may, or to the entire commission, the use of the structure as residential or building is governed by the zoning regulations. And going to a commercial use in this area is allowed according to those zoning regulations. That's not the issue in front of you today. However, the change in that use from residential to commercial is what brings in the setback requirement. If you do not grant this special exception and you're going to allow a commercial use in here, or the city allows a commercial use, you don't, the city does with its regulations, what you would be telling the applicant and anybody else who's looking to develop on this lot in this area is you need to tear down the portions of the building that are in blue. Well, I'm calling it outlined in blue. It might be aqua. So to grant this special exception is to allow that portion of the building to stay there inside that 30-foot setback area.
And staff is recommending approval of the special exception for the cyan area to remain.
You do explain B again.
Well, let's deal with.
Since we're doing it one at a time.
Let's deal with A.
One at a time.
Right.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Let's deal with A first.
I don't really ready. Are we ready to vote?
Just any other questions by the commission or to the staff or applicant?
I have a question. I have a question for staff. The screen fence that you're talking about providing, it sounds like a landscape shrub kind of fence. Is that correct, or as part of the condition, having the parking be close to the side property?
So again, with this being the special exception is dealing with the current configuration of the property. The areas in Salmon are within a proposed improvement for the property, so they don't exist yet. So that's why there are not, those are not nonconformities to the property.
Okay.
The only nonconformity is the existing building, or the portion of the building that exists within what would be required to be a buffer. And again, this is a known issue that we are looking at amending. It's just that this currently, as the code is written today, has to have this exception approved.
Thank you very much.
Ma'am, does your statement have anything to do with what we're discussing for A right now? Does it have to do with this particular discussion, right? With this? Okay.
Chair, this is Ms. Gurley. She's the property owner and the
Right,
applicant.
that's why I was trying to make sure this was. Please state your name and address.
Tessie Gurley, 3602 Plum. The house that I own apparently was, it's been there since the 40s. Maybe a relative, a grandmother or something, and they moved the little house next door in, apparently, because there was a sidewalk going from my back door to the back door of that house. And so I don't know if sometime it was maybe sectioned off to where the little house that's there is like 700 square feet, so it's very small. It's on a very small piece of property, so I don't know if our property was somewhat divided to put that little house there because of being a relative to the people that live there. So I think that's one reason it's so close. And then I have a comment about the alley as well. I don't know if that applies right now.
No, ma'am, we're talking about this just this particular section? No, okay, thank you so much. Okay, any other questions from the staff or commission applicant, for the applicant? Okay, we would like to break this down into 2 votes for this VARZ 23-15. And could you read the first motion for A?
I make a motion to approve variance 23-13 as presented.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be too legalistic, but you just mean section A of variance 23-13, is that correct?
Yes, section A.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
It's been motion and second. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. For section A, special exception has been approved 5-0. Now we'd like to move into section B of VARZ 23-13. And do we have the staff or commission discussion at this time?
So if I may, just to rehash, section B is the variance. So we've previously talked about it being a 30-foot landscape buffer. This is proposing it to be a variance to reduce that landscape buffer down to 3 foot. And staff is proposing that that there be a condition with the variance to supply a vegetative screen dense enough to be completely opaque year-round within a year, planted at least 4 feet tall, and to grow within 8 feet within a year's time span. So essentially what it is asking is to have that landscape buffer and to provide a buffer for the residents within that 3 foot area.
So, and I'm hearing you correctly, Martin, that the concern that the residents have that have voiced their concerns in making this change, how would this really impact the rest of the residents? I know I'm putting you on spot, but I'm trying to understand what they're saying and what we're trying to do here and how the impact will apply.
So concerns that I've heard were about traffic and about parking and about being able to utilize the alleyway. The alleyway is a portion of public property as it is not within a private lot. So access and the ability to utilize that alleyway is granted to all properties that back out onto, I was trying to say front out, but that back out or have the opportunity to back out onto that public alley. So, you know, the 4 spaces that are closest to Plum Street, you know, those are spaces that any property, whether it was this property or properties to the south of it or continuing on, have the ability to be developed and to back out onto there. So it's not, the landscape buffer is not necessarily protecting these parking spaces. The tandem space that is immediately adjacent to it is affected by the buffer because it's providing some screening right at the property line there. But you know, the ability to install parking, all of that is by right within the Old Town Mixed Use Zoning District.
So looking at this illustration here, we have the yellow dotted line that is, if we did not approve this, that is where the 30-foot landscape or buffer would be that will not allow for that extra fourth parking location. Is that correct?
Correct. If the board were to say that you did not want to approve a 3-foot buffer and that you did not want to approve any variance, then both these two spaces, this space and this space would not be allowed to be a part of the development, as those spaces are within the 30-foot buffer.
30-foot
The
setback, right.
only thing that has a special exception and a right to be within the landscape buffer is the portion of the previous residence that was just voted on.
So is there any parking requirements for the new non-residential commercial building? Do they have to have so many parking spaces? Is that part of the rules as well?
So the Unified Development Code offers sites that are in Old Town to have a severe reduction to their minimum required parking spaces. So with this building being roughly 2,000 square feet, and its proposed use being an office space, that would typically generate about 6 spaces that are necessary. The Old Town Mixed Use Zoning District says 6 spaces, I'm rounding here, but 6 spaces are required. Instead of providing those 6 spaces, you only have to provide half of them. So the minimum parking requirements are half of what they would normally be. And in this case, around 3 spaces are what is minimum required. The applicant has said that they want more spaces. So that's where this is being requested. So that way they can provide the 3 spaces up front, the 4 spaces in the back, and the 1 tandem space.
With that issue, Mr. Lewis, and I don't want to pretend to be an engineer, but with a use of this size, or maybe even a planner, I don't want to step on anybody's toes, if you don't allow this particular variance request, and if what the applicant thinks is appropriate parking is also what the customers or the people using the business think is appropriate, meaning you might need, was that 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? You might need 9 spaces. If you don't grant the variance, and they truly do need 9 spaces, the other 6 have to be somewhere else. And the only other place where those businesses would go, and again, I don't want to step on Raj's toes or Martin's toes, but the assumption would be that they'd have to park on the street. And if you park on the street, then your question to the earlier issue was, how does that affect the residents in the area? Well, if there's not parking on this site that's sufficient and it goes on the street, and if the concern is parking, there's a potential that could worsen the congestion on the street, because now the cars have to go around the parked cars. The traffic has to go around the parked cars.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board or commission?
I'll make a statement that to add on what you just said is nobody's going to want to go to or from this building during school hours and drop off and pick up, because that street it's horrible to drive down.
Mark, I've got a question. Within the scope of our ability to modify or recommend a modification if we pass this, is it within the scope of our authority to say, okay, we agree to parking space A, B, C, but we don't agree with parking space E, F, G, or has it got to be a whole one or nothing, so to speak, a whole or nothing?
Can we reduce it from 30 foot to 15 on the south side versus the north side? Can we do something like that to maybe ease, looking at for the residential to keep some type of the buffer? Have we looked at that option?
So, knowing that every case is special and unique in and unto itself, we did utilize some of our prior history within the Old Town area. If you remember, there was a photography studio off of Walnut that we ended up reducing the buffer on that site. That's where our reducing a whole and maintaining one strip was the idea. The board can make modifications and recommend that certain things be changed if they see fit. One of the reasons why we wanted to maintain this request was that they are looking to utilize and maintain that 30-inch tree that is there. So that was one aspect that we were basing some of our judgment on.
Which side is the tree on? Is it
You can see the green outline.
okay, that one there, okay.
Martin, on the diagram, you pointed out where the tree is, that's a consideration. On this picture here, to the right of the tree, I don't see any marked parking spaces there on that long, right in there. What's that area proposed to be, or is it going to be
That's a parking space.
So that's the tandem space. Essentially, you see tandem spaces in residential developments. But again, the Old Town District allows for tandem parking to be provided.
So on the looking at this photo on the north with those 1, 2, 3 parking spaces there, is that in the alley or is that on the other side?
These 3 spaces back out onto Galveston.
That backs on to Galveston.
Correct.
Is that where we were? Is that the congestion is at the bottom though? Correct. Oh, the congestion's at the top.
So the alley is towards the bottom of the screen.
Uh-huh.
The townhomes that the residents and the people who spoke are south of the screen, so off the screen.
Gotcha.
Yes, in both spots.
Gotcha. I see what you're saying.
You can see this a little better in this image. These are the townhome where they would back out into the alley.
And the alley is gravel, is that correct? Covered in gravel?
I would say that the gravel, that the alley is, probably a gravel or crushed concrete.
Okay. And the 20-foot width of the alley does that meet code, or if we have a code for alley widths, is 20 foot correct?
Alleys are kind of unique within Pearland. There's not a lot of places within the city that have an alley, but 20 feet has kind of been a standard.
It was code at the time that it was constructed. If somebody were to come in now with this type of development, the fire marshal would have to review that and review its density and determine whether or not fire apparatus has to go down that and whether it can fit in 20 feet. But if the fire apparatus is able to serve it from either sides and not have to go down the alley, that regulation most likely would not apply.
Yeah.
Does your statement have to do with what we're discussing right now? Okay, yes, go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, when I purchased the property, the driveway backed out onto Plum Street. So as has been mentioned, the traffic there is horrendous. When a car was parked in the driveway, which it was not very long, it extended almost to the street. And the children walking to and from school would have to go around the back of the car, basically into the street, to get back around to the sidewalk because the car would completely block the sidewalk there. So I eliminated the back out and the driveway on Plum Street. Is there another picture there showing the side of what was the garage? Anyway, there was a, right there. And so that when a car was parked, like they were going to pull into the driveway, it was over the sidewalk. So the students were walking around behind the cars, very dangerous because cars just line up there. And so I eliminated those two places in hopes that we could park in the back because it's very much of a hazard for people to be backing out onto Plum Street. So I did away with those two, already.
Okay, thank you,
They
ma'am.
park in the alley.
Thank you, ma'am. So hold on one second. So I want to address, as chairman, I want to address, because I see y'all looking at me crazy. The portion of the persons wishing to speak for and against, that's ended. We are now in what we call applicant, staff, and board discussion. So that's the portion where she's the applicant, we're the board, and this is the staff, so we're having the discussion now. So it's not like I'm not acknowledging you, but that's why I'm trying to make the point now that your portion has already ended. So we're moving to a different portion. So that's why we're doing that. So now we like to move into, continue with the applicant and board discussion.
Martin, can you leave that photo up right there? Don't change from that photo. And I have a question for the applicant. On the tree, I'm not sure what direction I'm looking. I guess to the right would be west. Is that true?
That's south.
South. That's
Toward the fence
yeah.
would be south.
And we would leave that tree, and you're saying there's enough distance between the tree and the existing wooden fence to be a parking lot or to be the tandem parking?
Yes, sir.
That's what it was called?
Mm-hmm. And the alley is public property, so
Well,
I think,
is this the alley I'm looking at?
yes, sir.
Okay. I can see where that would be tight if you had parking spaces there. That would be a short distance.
I think there's more space than what it appears right there, but
Any other questions or comments from the board to the staff or applicant? Would you like to put the motion up, please? Yeah, there you go.
This is the portion that includes the condition, if the board chooses to.
I make a motion of variance 23-13B to approve within the landscape buffer along the south property line for a length of the parking area, a vegetative screen dense enough to be completely opaque year-round shall be provided, which is at least 4 feet tall at the planting and at least 8 feet tall within 12 months.
It's been motioned. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been motioned and second. Any discussion? I'm still kind of confused because
Amen to that.
yeah, but I understand what we have at stake here, but I think that this is just looking at a situation where we have old Pearland, which was literally smaller than what we have been looking at our width, and things have changed over the years, and versus what we're dealing with now with the new rules and regulations that's in place. I want to at least acknowledge that. So any other discussion? Okay. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. Motion is denied 3-2. We'd like to move into number 5 with consideration and possible action of VARZ 23-14 with a special exception to construct a building expansion on a property with existing nonconformities. This is a request by Don Kramer, applicant, on behalf of Walter Conrad, owner, for approval of a special exception as permitted by the Unified Development Code, ordinance number 2000-T, to allow for development to occur on a property with an existing nonconformity. This is with a general location of 5331 West Orange Street, Pearland, Texas. Staff?
Sorry, switching over. I'll be taking this one this time. So the special exception request is to allow for the construction of a building expansion on a property with a non-conforming use. As mentioned, the general location is 5331 West Orange Street, and the zoning of the property is the light industrial M1 district. And specifically, the request is to construct a 16,800 square foot building expansion on a property with a nonconformity. And specifically, the nonconformity pertains to the existing residential building in the northeast corner of the lot, which is occupied by a residential use currently, which is a nonconforming use in the M1 district. And so to date, staff has received one phone call asking for more information about the request. Kind of looking at the zoning of the property, there's light industrial M1 zoning to the north and to the west of the property. There's some single-family residential 2 zoning to the south across Orange Street, and there's a planned unit development district to the east. And looking at the future land use designation for the property, we see an industrial designation for the property, as well as it's predominantly surrounded by industrial to the north, east, and west. And then to the south is a medium-density residential designation. Here's an aerial view of the property. There's some single-family residential to the east and to the south, and then to the north and the west is some undeveloped land. A little bit of history on the property. The subject property was originally developed with a residence in the 1920s. A portion of the subject property was then annexed into the city in 1960, and the rest of the subject property was annexed in 1983. In 2000, a 105,700 square foot manufacturing facility was developed, and that's this building right here that was developed in 2000. The development of the facility led to the existing residence being moved to the northeast portion of the property from further south along Orange Street. So the building is more up in this area now, and it was more closer along Orange Street originally. And then in 2004 and 2005, improvements were made to that existing residence. And currently the property is going through the platting process in order to further be developed with the expansion. And here's a view of the subject property from Orange Street. You may not be able to see it, but behind the tree line is where the manufacturing facility currently is. And here's the proposed site plan. As mentioned, there's the existing manufacturing facility, and then towards the back or rear of the property is the roughly 17,000 square foot building expansion. And then that existing residence is on the northeast side of the property. And so looking at the existing nonconformity for the property, it's specifically pertaining to the residential use on the property, which is in that existing residential building. And specifically, here's kind of a look of that original building. This is the original 1920s building that was moved to this portion of the site and has remained on site and has made some improvements to it. And so looking at the criteria for approval of a special exception, staff found that the request met criteria for granting a special exception. And so the existing property is classified as being non-conforming with regards to the existing residential use, as that use is not a permitted use within the M1 district. It should be noted that The residential use has occupied the property since the 1920s and has most recently received approval for alterations to the residence in 2004 and 2005. While the property was the M1 district. And so the requested special exception is to allow for the residential use to remain on the property as the property is further developed with the expansion. And so as mentioned, the request meets criteria 4, and therefore staff recommends approval of the special exception request to allow for construction to occur on a property with an existing nonconformity. And that concludes staff's report.
Thank you. Is there applicant presentation? If you would, go to the podium and state your name and address.
My name is Don Kramer. My address is 310 Legends Drive in Spring, Texas. Obviously, I'm not used to speaking in public. I was Vice President of Operations of Verde Construction Management when Rolex Shutters of Texas was built in 2000. I was retired when Walter first contacted me late last year, and wasn't intending to go back to work because I didn't need to, but because Walter and Evie were family friends, I decided to take this project on and become Walter Conrad's in-house project construction manager. In 1999, Walter and his wife Evie purchased the 29 acres off of Orange Street to build his new 105,000 square foot manufacturing facility to relocate his growing Rolex Shutters of Texas business from Houston to Pearland, Texas. In 2000, we broke ground on a new facility, and during the permitting process as the project construction manager, we determined that the manufacturing facility would have to be moved further west to allow the future expansion of Woody and future water and sewer easements, or provide water and sewer to future developments. When the property was purchased in '99, there existed, as stated earlier, a 1930s era wood-framed farmhouse that I understand was built by the Yost family. Am I pronouncing that correct, hopefully? That I understand the street right in the area is also named after that family. Walter and Evie did not want to demo the house because they felt it had historic properties about the property. We know that because we had several people come and visit us during construction who grew up and knew people that lived in the home. Therefore, this non-legal conforming structure farmhouse was moved to the front of the from the front of the southern section of property to approximately 675 feet northeast corner of the planned 10-acre development. This was done to allow for detention and landscaping to be provided on the southern part of the property. In 2004, the owner applied for and was given a remodeling permit to add foundation, re-roof the structure, add new plumbing, electrical, and air conditioning to the house. As in addition, additional work was done in order to meet the TDI requirements. The owner again obtained a water meter and tap from the city to supply water to the house, electrical service from CenterPoint Energy, and a septic permit to grant sanitary usage, since the public water only existed in Woody Road right-of-way. Again, in 2005, a second permit was granted for additional repairs, and Walter was given a certificate of occupancy stating that it was for residential additional alterations. During the past 20 years, the house has been used as a non-legal conforming residential structure with family members, employees, and others residing in the home. I think it's important that the people of the city, especially the people here today, understand or know that Walter lost his loving wife in April 22. This house was personally important to her. She personally was involved in the renovations and remodeling, selected colors, selected finishes to the house. And so it has a remarkable importance to the family as a whole. In addition, Mr. Conrad has sold off 17 acres of the original 29, and another 17 acres he owned in Pearland. He's taken the life insurance from his wife's passing and the sale of the 2 tracts of land, and instead of retiring to a beachfront property or to a West Texas ranch, Mr. Conrad has elected to reinvest these funds into his business to make it more competitive, ensure that Rolex Shutters of Texas continues under his daughter's stewardship in the future. The new commercial permit application is for a 16,000 square foot expansion of the existing manufacturing facility and does not include any remodeling, addition, or changes to the house, nor does this residence affect Rolex Shutters operations. The expansion of the facility will require additional skilled employees to be hired to operate the new equipment, which represents a $1.8 million investment in equipment, along with help make their business more competitive in the market without impacting traffic, since they currently buy the materials that they're going to finish from other manufacturers and ship it in. So literally the material comes in, instead of being finished somewhere else, he's going to finish it in his own facility, but the same quality material is going to be going in and out. Today, Rolex Shutters employs 47 full-time employees and ships storm shutters and awnings to 50 states in Canada and South American countries. The property was and continues to be zoned light industrial M1 with the residence along the east and south property lines. For 20 years, the residence has been a legal non-conforming structure on the property with city services being provided and several remodeling permits granted. Mr. Conrad has invested a sizable amount of funds to remodel this home with full knowledge of the city by evidence of permits and certificates of occupancy. We're asking this board to grant Mr. Conrad a special exception and allow him to keep the legal non-residential structure and continue using it as a residential dwelling.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, sir. We'd like to move in for a person wishing to speak for or against proposal. Okay, we'd like to move into commission and staff and applicant discussion. Comments, questions to the staff or to the applicant from the board? Sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance 23-14 as presented.
It's been motioned. Is there a second? It's been motioned and second. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. Motion carries 5-0. We'd like to move into number 6.
Before we go forward, if I could verify, I didn't hear who the second was from.
Jerry.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
We'd like to move into number 6 for consideration and possible action for VARZ 23-15, special exception and variance for a non-residential use in the Old Town Mixed Use District. This is a request by Jason Deo, and please excuse me if I said that wrong. Applicant and owner for approval of a special exception and a variance as permitted by the Unified Development Code Ordinance Number 2000-T to allow a special exception for development to occur on a property with existing nonconformities. Variance to reduce the landscape buffer for non-residential use that has a side or rear contiguous to any residential use or residential zoning district. The general location is 2210 North Galveston Avenue. Staff.
Thank you, Chair. So once again, this is another special exception and landscape buffer variance for a change of use for property that's within the Old Town Mixed Use Zoning District. This one is also broken up into 2 requests, first of which is the special exception for the existing building, and the second is the landscape buffer reduction, which we'll get into shortly. So we've had 1 written comment against and then 1 phone call for additional information. Here you can see that the property and all of the property on that side of North Galveston Avenue is within the Old Town Mixed Use Zoning District, and then the school is just to the other side. Again, all of this property on this side of North Galveston is within the Village District for the future land use, and then you have public / semi-public across the street. Once again, you've got single family on the north and south, townhomes and an office just to the west, and the school to the east. So this property was developed in 1958 with a single family residence, and it was annexed into the city again in 1959. Here you can see what is currently existing on the property. This image is from Galveston Avenue. And this is their proposed site plan indicating the 1,187 square foot building and the 3 spaces that are proposed for back out parking. This is their proposed landscape plan. You can see that the green areas circled represent large green trees and vegetation that offer some barriers. And then on the east property line, there are some green rectangles that represent some proposed planter boxes that would have cypress trees to offer screen in the non-trafficked area. So again, what creates the nonconformities is the change of use and the requirement that landscape buffers be provided, as we previously discussed. This site is larger than the previous site, so those 30-foot buffers don't meet in the middle this time. Instead, they have a 15-foot separation in between where those buffers end up. So there is a portion of the existing or the prior residence within both of the buffers that are outlined in green. And then you can see where those 30-foot landscape buffers end up in the red outline. So for portion A of the request, it meets special exception number 4. And staff's analysis on this request, with property changing from a residence to the non-residential use, it's classified as being a nonconformity in regards to the 30-foot landscape buffer along the north and south property lines. If the site were to be brought into compliance with the required landscape buffers, then any portion that was previously outlined in green in the existing building within the landscape buffers would need to be demolished as it encroaches on those buffers, which imposes the hardship on the property. So the special exception is to allow for the existing building to remain within the required 30-foot landscape buffers as the property is developed. So with that, it meets criterion number 4, and staff recommends approval of the special exception to allow the improvements to occur on the property with an existing nonconformity. Going into the landscape buffer variance, the request shows a 29-foot landscape buffer to be proposed on the west property line, and then the landscape buffer being reduced down to the 5-inch mark on the east property line. This is due to the existing concrete that's been poured for the site. And then the applicant is stating that they will plant or create those landscape planters to be utilized in that area. So this meets 3 out of the 8 criteria within the Unified Development Code. The hardship stated by the applicant does not pertain to the physical feature of the property that creates an undue hardship for the applicant to meet compliance with the code. However, we recognize that the Old Town site, residential to non-residential use, change of use, presented a unique challenge as the surrounding, or it is surrounded by single-family residential uses, and thus generates that requirement for the 25 or 30-foot landscape buffer that potentially covers portions of the lot. So in this case, the subject property, the landscape buffer covers about 2/3 of the lot. As staff is currently working with the City Council to rewrite the UDC, this is one of the areas that we are changing or proposing to change and are seeking to amend to provide relief from this requirement. Staff recognizes that the current requirements for landscape buffers places a hardship on the property being redeveloped within the Old Town District, as buffers restrict new improvements, such as placing parking on the property. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the requested variance with the following conditions: that a 3-foot planting area be provided along the north and south property line for proposed landscaping to be planted. And then within those buffers along the, that should say north and south property line, for the length of the parking area as a vegetative screen dense enough to be completely opaque year round, to be provided, which is at least 4 feet tall at planting and at least 8 feet tall within 12 months. With that, Chair, I'll pass back to you.
Thank you, Martin. We'd like to move into applicant presentation. You would state your name and address for us, sir.
Good evening. My name is Jason Deo, and I live at 2014 Hill House here in Pearland, but we're here today to talk about 2210 Galveston Avenue. I own 2 Chick-fil-A restaurants here in town. Just to clarify some things, we're not opening a Chick-fil-A restaurant on Galveston Avenue. But about 2.5 years ago, purchased this 800 square foot home. It was classified as mixed use to be able to use for personal office for myself, to get some work done away from home and away from the busyness of the restaurant, some storage for some marketing and signing and things like that that we don't use on a regular basis, and a place for me to meet with my general managers once a week. And 2 days a week, we invite 3 to 4 applicants to do a second round interview there. When we purchased the property, driveway was kind of a wreck, and to not encroach on what we've already talked about being a very busy area, busy street, we had a driveway there that was poured, and I'm accountable for not understanding originally what my contractor was and was not doing, and we have a driveway that is poured too close to the line there to allow the proper vegetation buffer. Their original piece, as far as moving it to commercial, once again, shame on me. I thought mixed use meant we could utilize it for what we wanted to utilize it for. I didn't know we needed to go through the classification change. So it is probably, there's probably someone there about 10% of the time. It's used far less than a typical residence would be. It's maintained commercially, professionally by everyone that I use at our businesses for everything inside and out. And as far as the landscape buffers, an idea was shared with by the staff to be able to do the planters there on top of the concrete to basically mimic what our goal was with the ordinance or the rules there. And so I'm up for doing whatever I need to do to kind of get in compliance there. So just looking for some guidance and some help with that.
Thank you, sir. We'd like to move into person wishing to speak for or against proposal. Okay, we'd like to move into now staff and commission and applicant discussion. Any questions from the board or statements to the board, from the board?
Martin, can you leave that elevation picture right there and just hold it there a minute? So there would be nothing required of the applicant to dig up or move less than what's poured in concrete up front, correct? The variance would not require anything to be
I was
dug
gonna say,
up.
I would suggest that we do similarly to the prior application where we talk about A first and then B second. So for the special exception, the change of use is what generates the landscape buffer requirement, and a foot of the home on this portion or this side exists within that landscape buffer, and then a good portion of the prior or the structure exists within that landscape buffer on this side of the property. So that's what we're recommending approval of the special exception to allow those structures to remain.
There's no new construction being requested on the variance, though. I understand we want to talk about A and B, but there's not going to be any new construction requested on the existing concrete pad at any place. Is that correct?
Correct. Whether it be A or B, request A or request B, there's no new construction being presented. This would be a retroactive request for the variance. So had this portion been done, and I think the city had known that this was commercial instead of residential when the permits came in, it would have said this is the rule that would have complied at the time, and the applicant's coming in to comply with what the rules would have been when he bought the building and got those permits for that construction. And there is one other, well, do you want to continue handling A first? And then there's one other thing that I'd like to mention on B that is different from other issues, but I don't want to disrupt your flow.
Let's go ahead and deal with A right now. Any other questions or statements from the commission right now? Okay, would you read the motion for A for variance VARZ 23-15, please?
Okay. Say, can you? I'm sorry. I make a motion to approve variance VARZ 23-15A as presented.
I'll second it.
It's been motion and second. Any discussion? It's been motion and second, no discussion. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. VARZ 23-15, request A has been approved 5-0. We would like to move into staff and commission applicant discussion for VARZ 23-15, section B.
Can you please put the conditions that you proposed? Thank you.
On this particular request, as I said, this was for a variance, and it's going back in time to when the applicant submitted that particular application or submitted the building permits for the renovations in that area. I don't think that staff knew that it was commercial at that time. The difference, or a key thing I think to keep in mind when you look at this one, is there was a driveway that encroached in that landscape buffer at the time, and you could get really super technical on this and say, give me a special exception for the driveway that was there, and then a variance for the things that are outside of that driveway. But the primary portion of the pavement that this application covers, I think, is for the driveway that was there. And I'm sorry, Martin, I know you just scrolled through those pictures and got back to the screen. But if you look at the right-hand side of the house, oops, you went too far. Well, you could see it here. It would be at the top portion of the screen. There was always a driveway there. So that pavement would have been entitled to the special exception at that time. And that is the pavement that is the closest to the neighbor. So I don't know if I'm painting the best verbal picture for you, But when you look at the house from the street view on the right-hand side, the part that, there you go, the part that's in front of that window, a lot of that pavement was already there. And I think that that's important to recognize that only a portion of the pavement was poured without the benefit of a commercial permit review when staff did that, and it should be accounted for in this particular application.
So
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I was going to ask clarification. So what this picture shows is on the far right-hand side of the existing concrete apron there, that does not conflict with the required minimum separation between the two properties. Is that correct?
It does conflict, but it would have conflicted
Anyway.
anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I think it may have been widened a little bit. I mean, I don't want to mislead anybody. It may have been widened by a foot or two towards the right, but a large portion of that was driveway, because that portion of the building was a garage, and it existed at that time.
Thank you.
You place the motion on the screen, please. We'd like to move into consideration and possible action.
I make a motion to approve variance 23-15B as presented with the motion. I'm sorry, this is the wrong one. Can you?
You could refer to it just as the condition presented by staff.
With the condition presented by staff.
It's been motion and second.
I second the motion.
It's been motion. Now it's second.
Long night.
Any discussion? It's been motion and second. We've had no discussion. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. Motion carries 5-0 for VARZ 23-15, Section B. We'd like to move into number 7 for consideration and possible action for VARZ 23-18. This is a special exception to plat and construct a fence on a property with existing nonconformities. This is a request by Todd Slayton, applicant, on behalf of Pearland Church of Christ, owner, for approval of a special exception as permitted by the Unified Development Code Ordinance Number 2000-T to allow for improvements to occur on a property with an existing nonconformity. This has a general location of 2217 North Grand Boulevard, Pearland, Texas. Staff report.
Thank you, Chair. Let me introduce Patrick one last time.
Thank you, Martin. So as mentioned, the request is a special exception to plat and construct a fence on a property with an existing nonconformity. The zoning is the Old Town Mixed Use District. And so the existing nonconformity on the site pertains to the existing buildings on the property as they encroach into the side and rear setbacks on the property along 2 of the property boundaries. And to date, staff has received 2 phone calls asking for more information on the request. And so looking at the surrounding properties, we see all the surrounding properties are also the Old Town Mixed Use District. And the properties to the north, east, and west are the Village District designation. And the property to the south is the park designation for the future land use plan. And looking at the aerial view of the property, we see some single-family residential uses to the east and west, as well as to like the northeast. We see a multifamily residential use to the northwest, an office use as well to the northeast, and then the park, which is Zielinski Park, across Zielinski Drive to the south. So a little history on the property. It was originally annexed into the city in 1959. The subject property was first developed in 1959, And then additional buildings were constructed in 1975 and 1988. And then more recently, currently the property is going through the platting process. And here's a look of at the subject property. The left-hand image is along Grand Boulevard. The right-hand image is along Zelensky Drive. So if you're looking from the park at the subject property. And then the last image is from Park Avenue looking at the property. So here's some of the existing conditions of the property with North Grand Boulevard to the west, Park Avenue to the east, Zelensky Drive to the south. We see most of the buildings are located kind of along Grand Boulevard with, originally there was an alleyway running through the back of the property along, if you can see, it's lots 20, 21 through 22 of Block 7. That's where the alleyway ran, and now that the property is being platted, the boundaries of the lot are changing, and so that's the purpose of the special exception, is as the property is being platted and the constructing of the fence, the special exception is needed for some of the nonconformities on the property. And so the two nonconformities pertain to two of the property boundaries, and the first one in the northwest corner of the image is there's a 5-foot side setback within the Old Town mixed use district, and it's hard to see, it's a slight encroachment, but the building is currently about 3.2 feet from the property line up there, so it's encroaching within that 5-foot side setback for detached structures within the Old Town mixed use district. And then as we move a little further down, this area where there used to be an alleyway there, and the setback actually used to be 7.5 feet. Now that the alleyway's gone, the Old Town mixed use requires a 20-foot rear setback. And so this portion of the existing building is within the rear setback, and it's approximately, I want to say it's like 9.5 approximately feet from the new property line. So it's encroaching within that rear setback. And staff finds that the request meets criteria 4 of the criteria for granting a special exception request. And so the existing property is classified as being nonconforming with regards to the required side and rear setback along the property boundaries. And both the structures that encroach, they were developed in 1959 and 1988. Prior to the adoption of the current Unified Development Code in 2006. The requested special exception, therefore, is to allow for the buildings to remain in their current configuration as the proposed improvements occur on the property. And as mentioned, the request meets criteria 4, and therefore staff recommends approval of the special exception request to allow for improvements to occur on a property with existing nonconformities. And that concludes staff's report.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Is there an applicant presentation?
Justin Gonzalez, 2906 Waterloo Road, Pearland. I'm the minister at this congregation. We've been kind of at this for about 1 year and 3 months now. We're just trying to put a fence on the backside of our property and down the side in between us and the apartments to beautify our property and to just continue to be positive to the community and give people a safe place to be and children to be out in our greenway in the front without having to be falling on things in various ways. So yeah, I just appreciate your efforts here and your thoughts, and just looking forward to finish beautifying our project. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'd like to move into a person wishing to speak for or against proposal.
My name is Todd Slayton. I live at 5524 Cunningham Drive. I'm the land surveyor for Pearland Church of Christ. I'm here to support them for the construction of their new fence. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other persons wishing to speak for or against proposal? We would like to move into staff, commission, and applicant discussion. Any questions from the commission to the staff or applicant?
I have a question, if I may. On the outbuilding, the metal building that was moved in, it says the portion of existing building within the rear setback. Are we not talking about just an alleyway on the side of the building? I'm not sure. Where do you begin to measure the rear setback from?
So the alleyway went through a procedure to have, or a portion of the alley went through a procedure to have that land abandoned. So it is no longer a portion of the public alley. It is just a portion of private property. With the way the Unified Development Code is set up, anytime you have a roadway frontage, that frontage has to have a rear to it. So Zielinski Drive is the front, which then causes property lines that are parallel to that to be the rear. So you have a front on Grand, a front on Zielinski, a front on Park, which then causes this new property line to be a rear property line, and this property line to also be a rear, leaving this as your only side property line.
I'm extremely knowledgeable about that particular series of buildings and that lot there. So if you say that's an alleyway and we got to have there's some place you start to measure, I mean.
It's no longer an
It's no longer an alleyway, Commissioner Schrum. It used to be an alleyway. The alley has been abandoned. You would now go from the center of the former alleyway to determine the property line. And that's where the measurement would be from.
Makes sense, finally.
Any other comments or questions from the commission? We'd like to move into consideration and possible action.
I make a motion to approve variance 2318 as presented.
It's been motioned. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been motioned and second. Any discussion? It's been motioned, second, no discussion. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. Motion passes for VAR Z 23-18. It is 8:27 p.m. I would like to adjourn the December 2023 Zoning Board of Adjustments meeting.